From a park to a stadium to a little piece of heaven. That's next on City Corner. Hi, welcome to City Corner. I'm Steve Potter. Well, Connie Sexauer is a lifelong Cardinals fan and has a new book that's really more than just about baseball. Hi, Connie. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you very much.
It's great to have you here. In fact, I mentioned your book, From a Park to a Stadium to a Little Piece of Heaven, Cultural Changes as Seen Through the St. Louis Cardinals Baseball Diamonds. But it is a book that's a lot more about just the sport itself.
Yes, quite a few people have been shocked by that, but my trade is as a historian, and I love the city of St. Louis. I've written before about things about St. Louis, and I just can't see taking the stadiums away from the heart of the city and the people. So it really is a historical study from the mid-1880s to today.
Yeah, you make a point that I'd never really thought of before. I'm used to Busch Stadium, of course, the original Busch Stadium downtown. So I always think of, among the high rises and the city, the center of the city. But you make a good point that that's not true for everywhere.
No, it is not. And in fact, that's my favorite way of having a stadium is at the very heart of the city. When they're out like in Milwaukee, and I believe it's Kansas City, you park your car, they do a lot of tailgating. I love a stadium that's in the middle of the city. The hotels are there, the bars are there. One of my favorite things is thank God that the ballpark village got established because that was in the immediate works and then they ran out of funding. So it took years, but I think that just brings that whole area alive.
And well, what's it like in other cities that you've been to when the stadium is 8 miles from downtown and the suburbs are right over there?
Yeah, it's not like, that's certainly the way it is in Milwaukee. It's not in the heart of the city at all. And it's just set out all by itself. And then they're completely surrounded by parking lots. And when I go to the games, of course, I always wear my red Cardinal gear up here. I live in Wisconsin. And you have to pass these people and they're tailgating and drinking and they're making remarks because I have my red on and they have their blue on. But to me is more football than baseball. To me, baseball really is the heart of the city.
Well, didn't I hear that the only reason you like football is for the tailgating?
If I like it at all, that's why.
Well, someone might be
beating each other up is what I think it is. So,
well, so why would a girl from Milwaukee be writing a book about St. Louis?
She is not from Milwaukee. She was born and raised in St. Louis, and went to my first game when I was 12 years old, and absolutely, positively fell in love with baseball. I walked in that stadium, and I was used to Forest Park, an amusement park where you'd go swing on a swing. I never associated Sportsman's Park with what baseball would be. And a school friend of mine and I went, and I walked into those bleachers and saw what that was like and watched my first game, and I was hooked from then on. Then when I was born and raised in St. Louis, went to college at St. Louis Community College, and then University of Missouri, St. Louis. And then I moved to Cincinnati to get my PhD and moved up here to Wausau, Wisconsin, about 18 years ago to accept my job as a professor at the university.
But the Cardinals just stuck with you, I guess.
Oh, I actually took them home to my family. My dad had followed them in the 20s, and then they got married in the 30s, and it just wasn't a part of our family. So when I went, about a week later, there was a doubleheader, a twilight doubleheader on a Friday. And in those days, you could sit in the bleachers and you could bring in your picnic basket, and it was Friday, and we were Catholic. So we brought our tuna fish sandwiches and our jug of Kool-Aid. And for 50 cents each, our family could see the game. And then my little brother was 5 years old, and I taught him how to keep score at 5 years old. And the whole family just became fanatics about the Cardinals.
Boy, the prices have changed.
Yes, they certainly have. The
How
one
do you
thing
think
about
that?
the book, the one thing
Go
about
ahead.
the book is I went to St. Louis Community College. Today happens to be the anniversary of when Ozzie Smith hit that great home run where Jack Buck said, "Go crazy, folks, go crazy." And one of the first papers I wrote in my freshman college course is we were supposed to take our reader back to a day and time and write so those people thought they were there. And I had been to that game. So that's the paper I wrote. And then I wrote a couple of other things, and it never really dawned on me to write a book. It didn't until, I don't know, I kept writing little bits and pieces and decided that that's what I wanted to do. And it was 20 years of pure joy. I loved every bit of my research when I would come to St. Louis or when I'd read it in the papers. And now I've got hundreds of books on my shelf that are baseball books that are related to the Cardinals. And just reading like Bob Gibson's biography and Bill White's. And it's just been a real pleasure to do the research and then the writing.
Well, one thing about the Cardinals is not true for every baseball team. Some, but I guess not the majority. The Cardinals have so many fans outside of the city limits. That's not true for every team.
Yes. And in fact, over the years, I have traveled both ends of the coast down to Florida, different places, and delivering papers. And it truly is amazing how many people will approach me and say they are Cardinal fans. And I've also advertised the book to different fan clubs. And it's amazing. Washington, D.C., Nashville, Tennessee, different cities have fan clubs of like 350 members of Cardinal fans in those areas.
Well, that's not because our stadium is in an urban area.
It's just the love of the Cardinals.
Huh. Well, your book is about baseball, but, and we kind of alluded to this, it's really a lot about American culture too.
Yes, yes. I think it all fits together. That whole, apple pie, baseball, Americana.
Why did you start writing this paper? You told the story about how you really started it as schoolwork.
Yeah.
Was it just because you were a fan, or did you think?
Well, I actually wrote two pieces that are in the book in the very first class I took. One was on Sportsman's Park, and by that time we were in Busch Stadium 2 downtown. But you were supposed to take somebody back like to your childhood, the first time you went to a movie theater or the first time you went shopping. Well, I took it back and described Busch Stadium the way I remembered it. And then the next time, it was about 2 weeks later, and then it was, okay, something that's going on today. And I had just gone to that World Series game, and I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to write on. Then when you're a professor, in order to get tenure, you have to do a lot more than teach your classes. You have to get published, you have to deliver papers internationally and nationally. There's a whole lot of things that go on to your promotions. So I had 2 papers on sports. I had a couple on Catholic history, some on women's history. So I would use those as my sources for getting tenure. And then as I went along, I thought, I think I'm going to write a book on this. Just decided I was going to do it. Everybody should know all that information. Shouldn't go to waste.
And just on a side note, you kind of got a late start in your as far as higher education, didn't you?
Oh, I did. Yes. I did not start college until I was 40. And I first started part-time, never knowing I would ever get a degree. When I was in high school, I went to Our Lady of Mercy High School in University City. And when I was there, our English teacher, our senior year, told us that anybody that's going to college, the first course they should take is English writing. Because if you can't pass that course, you don't belong in college. Well, I never went immediately. I went and got a job. And when I was 40, decided to go to school. And I thought, well, I better take that course first because I don't know if I even belong in college. And my kids were going to college, and it was just something to do. And then I got my 2-year degree and decided I was going to go to UMSL and get my 4-year degree in teaching. Was 50 years old and I graduated with the highest honors and could not get a job teaching high school in the city of St. Louis. I'd go to the job interviews and all the people that were interviewing were like in their 30s, and they looked at me like, what does she know? So it was my professors at the University of Missouri, St. Louis that said, you should go on and get your PhD. And I thought, well, okay. So that's what I did. And I was the first in my class. I was 58 years old when I graduated with my PhD, and I was the first in my class to get a tenure track job. So they wanted me at that level.
Yeah, well, you're a serious student when you start that late. I'm glad you told us where you went to high school, because you know I was going to ask.
Of course, it's St. Louis.
Hey, let's go take a look at a couple of pictures from your book. And
Okay.
I want to start. This is an interesting aerial view of Sportsman's Park. There are probably a lot of people watching now that don't remember that.
Yeah, in fact, the last time I was in St. Louis, I just nostalgically drove out to the area and just sat. It's now a Herbert Hoover's Boys Club, but the neighborhood just I could take me all the way back to that. As you can see from the picture, it's located in a residential area. So they had little parking in those days, and a lot of people, including myself, would usually take the bus to the game. But on the days of the games, people would give their front yards up, and they'd have people. It's kind of like if you've ever been to Wrigley, that's how the situation around Sportsman's was. So, and then they had like drugstores on Grand Avenue, and I think there was a Carter carburetor factory there. So it was kind of like in an old-fashioned city as far as homes as well as businesses.
Yeah, I bet parking was interesting. They wouldn't have had any big parking garages back then, would they?
No, they didn't. And there was I think 2 parking lots across the street from the stadium. One was smaller, and that's usually where the players parked. So you were lucky if you got a parking spot there, because then you could sit and watch them come out to their cars. But other than that, it was around the stadium where people had grass on their front lawn, and you'd pull over and pay them $5 or whatever and park your car on their front lawn.
Were you the first in your family that was a baseball fan? Were your parents not?
My dad was in the 1920s, but then kind of lost interest in it. We didn't listen to the game or anything. And once I brought it back home at age 12, everybody got enthusiastic again. In fact, even after my mom died, or my dad died, my mom was living by herself. We'd come in and she'd have that radio on at night listening to the ball game, because she said it so reminded her of Dad.
Connie Sexauer is our guest today, and she has a new book, From a Park to a Stadium to a Little Piece of Heaven. And we're going to take a break and have more with Connie when we come back. Stay tuned.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. Since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. Got it. No.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Action!
I'm Steve Potter, and welcome back to City Corner. Today we're talking to Connie Sexauer. She's written this new book, From a Park to a Stadium to a Little Piece of Heaven, Cultural Changes as Seen Through the St. Louis Cardinals Baseball Diamonds. And as we kind of established in the beginning, Connie, your book is as much about sort of culture as it is about the actual game of baseball, and you've certainly done your history. You mentioned, though, something that happened to you when you were young, and I've got two dates that I want you to talk about.
Oh,
Two dates I've found in your book, and I think you referenced the first one here. 1957. You talked about how you got that invitation from a friend. So that
yes.
was your real first experience, right?
That was my first experience of real baseball. I was playing softball at school, but I didn't follow, not on TV or anything. And yeah, just to walk in Busch Stadium and see my first game, that's all it took.
What, did that seem more of like a boys thing back then?
No, it was just something, it never even dawned on me. But it was kind of funny when you say that, because once I started following the team and I followed the players, the boys were all a part of it. So of course my sister and I, she was a year older than I was, and we'd go to the games, especially Ladies' Day when it was less money. And yeah, we had crushes on all the players, as well as keeping score and following the team.
Here's a second date I got out of your book. October of 1964. That was the St. Louis Cardinals and the Cincinnati Reds. Why was that an important date for you?
That was the last game of the season when we won the pennant. And I was there. We could have tied, I think, with Cincinnati, and it might be Philadelphia. I can't remember the other team right offhand. But I was there at the game with my sister. And when the game was over and the Cardinals won, everybody's jumping out on the field and everything. And I'm running to my car. We get home. I walk in the door, grab a pillow and a blanket and a lawn chair. And my grandma said, "Where do you think you're going?" My parents were gone to a wedding that day. My grandma lived with us. And I said, "Well, I'm going down and sleep on the ground down there at the stadium because the World Series tickets go on sale tomorrow morning and I'm not missing that." She's crossing herself and, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, girl, you can't go down there. That's dangerous. You're all by yourself. I was like 18 years old and I said, "No, I'm going." So my sister went with me, and she had something at work where she worked that if you came to work every day for that month, they'd give you a bonus of a day's pay. They didn't like people taking sick days. Mm-hmm. So about 6 o'clock, my dad shows up 6 o'clock in the morning. My mom takes my sister to work and dad stays with me, and dad and I got tickets to the World Series. And I went to all 4 of the 1964 World Series games in St. Louis. And the tickets were so reasonable. I don't know offhand. There might be one in the book that's for the 64 World Series. I think they were something ridiculous, like $5 or something. Yeah. Where nowadays, I mean, it's a fortune. The last time, well, I won't tell you what I paid for my opening day ticket. It was a sin what I paid.
You'll tell me after the show, right?
All right.
Hey, Connie, let's look at 2 more pictures from your book. And these are both pictures of the old Busch Stadium. This was my really, I guess, first introduction as a kid to baseball. In fact, I have my picture in the paper, I think, because we went for a tour when I was about 6 or 7. I can't do the math. And there happened to be a newspaper person there, and he took a picture of our group, and they published it. And I'll never forget that. It was a picture of Busch. But I don't know. What are your memories of the old Busch Stadium that stick with you?
Well, I actually was very upset at first when they closed Sportsman's, and I boycotted for the first few months. I wouldn't even go to the games. And my cousin went to opening game. She thought that was really great. Her dad and she marched in a parade. And my dad finally said to me one day, he said, "You've got to go to the stadium." He said, "This is ridiculous." I said, "They should have never moved from sports." I mean, I was pretty adamant. But he got us tickets, and it was probably around the 4th of July that year we went. And it was so modern. And at first, I didn't really care for it. But of course, you go there and win World Series, and you go and you watch your favorite players, and eventually, it's beautiful. It really is. And what I loved about it was the arches at the top of the stadium that matched the arch in the background. It really was, when you saw that, you knew it was Busch Stadium. It was just a symbol of what St. Louis was.
You had someone write the foreword for your book, a gentleman by the name of Chuck Core. Who is he?
Chuck was my history professor at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. He taught sports and society, and he also taught British history. And he's always been a very strong supporter of mine. Actually, all of the professors at the University of Missouri, St. Louis were so supportive of me, and I'm still very good friends with most of them. I see them at conferences and things like that. And Chuck introduced me to sports and society as being important culturally. And he's always been very supportive of this book. He's been to a couple of my history presentations around the country. And when I asked him to write it, he agreed 100%. So I was very happy.
Well, I wanted to share with our viewers his first entry in the foreword and just have you
Okay.
It goes like this. More than 50 years ago, the English playwright and sports journalist Arthur Hopcraft described the importance of football. Quote, not a sideshow of this century. What happens on the field matters, not in the way that food matters, but as poetry does to some people and alcohol does to others. It engages the personality. And then he goes on to make the point, if you substitute the word baseball for football, it all kinds of comes into context. So what does that mean to you?
Well, 100% I agree. I mean, that's who I am at my essence, is a St. Louis Cardinals fan. And if you meet somebody that really, it's funny, I used to think I loved baseball. I was at Pittsburgh a few years ago watching the Giants and the Pirates play. My hotel was like across the street. I was in town for a conference. It's about the fifth inning, and I thought, what am I doing sitting here? I don't care which team wins or doesn't. I'm leaving. So I left, which I would never. I would stay till, the 26th inning if I had to for a Cardinal game. So that was real eye-opening for me. And actually, like now, I'm not watching the playoffs. I'm not watching the World Series. It doesn't really bother me. I don't care. I'm waiting for February.
Doesn't it seem weird to see it on TV and nobody in the stands? I wonder how that affects the
Oh,
players.
yes,
How does that affect the players, do you think?
I think it would affect them a lot. I mailed in my picture, so my Cardinal cutout was in the stands this year. I thought, I can't not be there.
Yeah, I have a friend who for years has volunteered as an usher, and she's been devastated this year because that was the highlight of her life every year, working Busch Stadium.
Yeah.
Let's take another look at a picture from your book. And this is, you label this the Busch dining room. What's this?
Is that the picture of Mr. Busch?
I think so.
Okay, so they had an area there that was a private membership club. And he could sit there in the rest of us were in the squelching heat of summer, but he could sit in his air-conditioned restaurant eating steak and drinking fine wine or Busch if he wanted to, and watch the game. And I just always got a kick out of that to me, baseball is out there. In fact, normally I love being in the bleachers. It's one of my favorite places to sit. So it's like, you're out with the crowd, and here you are, the owner, sitting there in your air conditioning, 90-degree temperatures of St. Louis.
Yeah, I've been in the private rooms before. They have their own bar and it's glassed in, and you feel more like you're at a country club.
Yes, absolutely. I guess it takes all kinds, right?
Right, as long as you're having a good time.
Yes.
I'd like to just pull out a couple of things from your book and ask you about. In the very first chapter, you mentioned Joe Buck, and you talk about baseball being more than a game, or I guess he said that. Baseball is more of a game, it's a way of life. Would you share your thoughts about him and other people that you mentioned in the book, like Stan Musial and Mark McGuire?
Well, they're the essence to me of what real baseball is all about. And they had the love of the game as much or more so, I guess, than fans do. I mean, they made it their life's work. And I think it is a part of your life. I can't imagine my life without baseball in it. And I'm not even as close as they are,
Mm-hmm. Well, you go back in history. What about those early years at Grand, and I always mispronounce the street?
Dodier?
Grand and Dodier.
Yes.
I guess that deals with the time around the turn of the century, 1900, right?
Well, they were still there from 1900 to what year did we move? 65, I think, something like that.
So I think you sort of make a point about and there's some significance in this. St. Louis was what at one time, I guess when it started, the fourth largest city in the United States, and then sometime
Yeah.
during the period they went down to sixth. What does that have to do with baseball?
Well, in that early time period, in order to be a big city, you had to have a Major League Baseball team and you had to be able to draw the crowds. So the fact that we were able to have not just one team, but we had the American League Browns as well as the National League St. Louis Cardinals, it drew people there and factories came, and it really helped to build the city because it was a uniting force of baseball. And of course, then when the radio comes along and television, and you get to spread the word about St. Louis and people get to see it and so forth.
On a side note, going back to Sportsman's Park for just a second, but I thought it was really interesting that you also address the issue of segregation, which is something maybe we don't really think about right now. But
yes, I actually have
real...
written. I've written on the civil rights movement, and the book I'm writing right now is on a real estate developer in St. Louis, Charles Vatterott. And when I was growing up, all of the neighborhoods were segregated. And so I looked at that time period when I looked at baseball, and it's really important, the Breaking the Barrier by Jackie Robinson. And then the players that we got that were the Bob Gibsons and the Bill Whites and the Kurt Floods and the Vince Colemans. These people really helped unite St. Louis, and I think certainly sparked the wins for the Cardinals. And I'm glad that we broke that barrier.
Yeah, from my own experience, I remember being a kid in the 60s, and when there were first Black characters on TV, it made you realize, there are Black people out there and they're real people. I would imagine the generation before, what happened there sort of had the same effect.
Yes, yeah, it's was very stark divisions. And I think it's hard, like even for my own grandchildren, to imagine what it was like during that time period.
Connie, we're just about out of time, but in a few seconds, baseball has sure changed from the days we've been talking about. Now it's big business and the money's bigger, revenues are bigger. Looking into the future, do you predict anything?
I don't know. I didn't buy into that until I took Chuck Corr's class. And I was sitting in the very front row and he talked about it being a business. It's always been a business. And I argued with him. And he looked at me and he said, "Do you think they would have played for free?" And then all of a sudden it dawned on me. And then, of course, looking in the book, I saw where it used to be. And now it really, really is big business. So I don't know. The money's there. And if people are willing to go to the games and pay it, I guess it'll still be there.
Yeah, well, you're still a fan, from a park to a stadium to a little piece of heaven. Connie Sexauer, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll look for your cutout in the stands next time.
Okay. Take care.
It's been fun. Have fun in Milwaukee and come back to St. Louis when you can.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Potter, and that's it for this edition of City Corner. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the game someday. Bye.